Tony Stewart wins in Las Vegas. We'll take a look back at the Cobalt Tools 400, and Smoke's victory in Sin City makes it 3 different winners in our first 3 races. So what have we learned so far in 2012? PRN anchor Doug Rice and Brad Keselowski spotter Joey Meyer join us as we go 3 wide live. I'm Tony Rizzuti, and welcome to 3 Wide Live. Today we are broadcasting from the beautiful Performance Racing Network studios, PRN, here at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and this is the house that Doug Rice built. And El Presidente, the president of PRN, joins us. Doug, what an awesome place to come to work.
Thank you very much, Tony. I really appreciate that. One small correction. This is the house that Bruton Smith built, and he's nice enough to let me work out of here. But good to have you here in our studio.
Oh, it's good to be here. And I tell you what, when you talk about great jobs, I think this guy's gig definitely qualifies. He's not only the spotter of the number 2 Miller Lite Dodge for Penske Racing, but he's also Brad Keselowski's jet pilot. He's Joey Meyer. Joey, welcome to the program.
Appreciate you having us.
I tell you what, with all the toys that you and Brad have, I mean, he's got race cars, you got jets, so who's got the better gig there?
Man, I'm going to say I do. I go faster. I go higher. And I've yet bought a sim. I haven't bought a sim for race cars, but the driver has recently bought a computer sim for the airplane. So I'm fairly convinced that I have the better gig.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming. We'll talk about the Cobalt Tools 400 in a second, but kind of the news of the week that was unveiled at Las Vegas, the new Dodge 2013 Sprint Cup car. And Joey, along with that unveiling came news that your team, Penske Racing, would be switching from Dodge to Ford. I'm sure you've known about this for a while, but what was your first reaction when you heard? And likewise, how now do the guys handle it in the shop? Because certainly they want to be good here in 2012, but we've learned you've also got to get a head start on 2013 in the new Ford.
One of the things that Penske Racing does a very good job of is keeping things under wraps. There are no rumors. So technically, Brad and the guys didn't know about it until about a week before the decision came down. Since that, we've heard that the discussion has been taking place for several months, trying to get Dodge to make a commitment and Ford wanting to make a commitment. So Roger, I believe, if I read correctly, he's a fairly successful businessman, and it's a purely business decision for the future of Penske Racing. The Dodge Charger is a beautiful race car. I was really looking forward to being one of the premier teams operating it. But now with the Ford Fusion coming out, it also is a beautiful race car. Those two manufacturers have done an outstanding job replicating the cars that are on the street and putting them back on the track. The fans are really going to love those two cars. From a standpoint of the race team, we have a really good handle on what our project was for 2012 with the current Dodge, and we were going to make a switch anyway. So at the end of 2012, there was going to be a change whether we were putting a Dodge body on or a Ford body on. Mm-hmm. There was going to be a change. So it was the perfect timing to have this happen.
Doug, I was following you on Twitter while you were at the racetrack, and you posted a tweet of a picture of the car. What did you think of the styling of the new Dodge, and do you think this new showroom look is going to resonate with the fans?
The fans loved it. I was emceeing the unveil there with Mike Helton and Ralph Gill, the head of the SRT program for Dodge. The fans love this whole progression of the cars looking a lot more like the cars that drive down the highway. So they win there. And this was one of my little takeaways. I'm watching Mike Helton and Ralph Gill, who is the head of the Dodge SRT program. And before this thing started, they're standing there, and they probably chatted 25 minutes. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, Mike Helton's not going to be talking to this guy for nearly a half hour if there's not going to be a Dodge team next year. It was a little awkward in the sense they didn't have a driver. They don't have a team. But from what I understand, a lot of phones have been ringing, and a lot of teams have expressed interest in being the lead pony for Dodge next year. So that'll get worked out. Right now, it's anybody's guess, but they'll be a team with a Dodge nameplate next year in NASCAR.
Yeah, and that now puts the ball into the Toyota and Chevrolet court to see what their cars are going to look like. But based off what we saw from Ford and Dodge, it should look really nice. All right, we got to take our first break here on the program. When we come back, we will review the Cobalt Tools 400 from Las Vegas Motor Speedway. More 3 Wide Life right after this.
Jeff Tutino here with C&R Racing Incorporated. Hey, we've all been there. We fill our radiator up full of water, put a 32-pound cap on it, go to the racetrack, and all of a sudden we pick up mud and debris and the temperature starts to climb. Driver sits there and says, should I finish this thing and blow the motor up, or should I go in and let these guys clean the thing off? Well, today with a pressurized system, learning how to use it, those worries are over. Finish the race. So if the C&R pressure system's for you, or you've already purchased and you want to learn more about the installation, then check out our installation video.
Welcome back to 3 Wide Live, along with Joey Meyer and Doug Rice. I'm Tony Rizzuti. Let's talk a little bit about the race last week at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And guys, the first thing I kind of noticed when I tuned in was kind of problems in practice. And certainly you kind of expect it in the back of your mind at Daytona when guys go out and pack draft and get to bump drafting that something might happen. But we saw Matt Kenseth have to go to a backup car at Phoenix and problems there. Then here right off the bat, Juan Montoya gets into the wall. We saw Marcus Ambrose spin. Jimmy Johnson goes to a backup car. Kyle Busch goes to a backup car. What's the deal with practice? Let's talk exclusively about Las Vegas, Doug. Were you surprised to see so much trouble right off the bat?
I was surprised with the people that had trouble, especially Kyle Busch and Jimmy Johnson. When we talk about car control in this business, those names are 1 and 2, and you can move them around however you like, but those are the guys we don't expect to spin out by themselves. So that was a little bit of a shock, but a lot of the drivers were talking about how kind of treacherous and rough that Las Vegas has become. And that's a good thing because you like character in your racetracks. I think that was responsible for a lot of that.
Joey, obviously you're the eyes for Brad. What was he saying over the radio? Was this a case of a green racetrack? Was it the tire? Was it a combination of things?
In order to get these cars to turn through the center of a track like Las Vegas, California, Michigan, the faster flatter bank tracks, you simply have to make them turn in the center. But by doing that, does make them loose off the corner. And every one of these incidents was caused by that. Right off the bat, cars getting loose off a 2 or off a 4 and slapping the wall. So yes, it was expected, but all the teams are going in that direction, just being really aggressive as they come off the truck. And it was early in practice as well, as everybody's trying to put up a quick time for the qualifying draw. And so yes, it's unexpected by like Doug said with the drivers, but overall, the guys are just pushing the limits, and it's going to happen to obviously the best of them.
Yeah, one of the big stories in the race was early on. Dale Earnhardt Jr. took the lead, pulled away from everybody. Doug, I was listening to your broadcast, and I think it was your partner, Mark Garrow, who said Dale Jr. had led more laps in the early goings of the Cobalt Tools 400 than he had the entire 2011 season. Certainly he didn't get the win, but do you think this was good momentum and a nice race for Junior Nation?
What impressed me the most was actually the very first lap. He wanted to get out and lead that race. He wasn't content to hang back and get behind Casey Kane or anybody else. He jumped out there and then stretched it out. At one point, he had a 5-second lead. I almost thought the earth was going to stop spinning on its axis for a little bit. But, the sun did eventually go down. But it was a good moment, and it showed that they can build a car and that Junior can drive a car to the front of the track. Now, he struggled later on in the race when he got back in the dirty air, but he's trending well right now. With a few precincts in, I think Junior looks pretty strong.
Joey, was clean air a huge thing at Las Vegas?
Yeah, absolutely. These cars, now that the teams have had several years to work on them, are actually producing more downforce than the older cars did. The problem with them is the aero map is smaller, so it's more dependent on air on certain areas of the track, and the splitter is super, super sensitive to that air. So that's why the Dale Juniors and the Tony Stewarts were making bold moves early, because they knew if they could get out front, they could run away with it. And the issue that Dale had and other teams had with Brad and everybody is that once you got back in traffic, you knew your car would be better out front, so you were kind of skeptical and scared to make a change to make the car drive through traffic, knowing that once you got out in front, you weren't going to be that good. So you were hoping, the Dale Jr. knew he had a great car early on. if he could get back out front, he'd have a great car again. He didn't want to make the change to free that car up in traffic for the fear of getting out in front and not being as good as he was.
You know, it was interesting you mentioned air. Doug, I was listening to your broadcast, and we see Jimmy Johnson had to start in the back with the backup car, comes racing up through the pack until he gets to Matt Kenseth, who had taken over the lead from Dale Jr., worked him, couldn't get by, and you uttered those words that NASCAR hates to hear, aero-tight. Do you really think that was the condition he was facing?
I mean, you could see it. It was plain as day, especially when you get two cars out like that. And you could even see it later in the race when Jimmy Johnson was going after Tony Stewart. They get right up to a certain point, and it's like the car hits a wall, and it gets into that dirty air. And you can see that if you've watched enough racing, it's very clear that that happens.
Yeah, aero-tight, definitely an issue, and hopefully that'll get better. Guys were able to, people will ask, well, he was able to work from the back to the front, but Joey, when your car's faster than everybody, it's easy to pass cars. When you get to equal cars, that's when the aero comes in, right?
Well, when you're back in traffic, if you're in cars 7, 8, and 9, car 7's still having a problem with aero, so having the better car allows you to get by him. But now that you're running second behind the Stewarts and the Matts, he's not experiencing any of it, so his car is automatically going to be superior to yours, even if your car was superior to the 41 guys you just got done passing. It is a problem. We call it popping bubbles. You'll see a lot of times cars simply are 2-3 car lengths apart trying to get through that bubble of air that's behind most of the cars. And once that happens, if you can get out in front, well, then your car is simply too loose. So it's a battle of a balance that we deal with in traffic. And it's at certain tracks, it just rears its ugly head. This coming week at Bristol, we won't see any of that.
Before we let the Dale Jr. thing kind of ride, he did have an incident with Mark Martin out there in which he was running the high groove. Mark tried to slide up the track. Jr. got into the back of him. Mark got into the wall. We saw a similar thing at Michigan last year in which Mark slid up in front of Jr. and Jr. tagged the wall. Do you think he was sending a message, Joey?
No, the only thing these drivers can do when they're behind the wheel is rub bumpers. That's the only way I can get your attention. He had no intention of putting Mark into the wall. And it was just a matter of, hey, don't forget I'm back here. I had a heck of a run off the corner, and I had enough momentum to pass you. Let me by. It wasn't a matter of I'm going to wreck this guy because he just pulled up in front of me. So that was just a matter of that's how they converse on the track. And just so happened that, again, coming off the corner, Mark was loose automatically because that's the way these cars run. So when Dale got in the back of him, it just put Mark in the wall a little bit. And again, back in Michigan, it just happened. Sometimes we don't have to blame anybody for these wrecks. Sometimes there's wrecks and sometimes there's accidents, and that was just an accident.
Yeah, I remember Michael Waltrip saying one time, "Can a guy just have a wreck? Does there have to be a reason?" I thought that was pretty an honest response. Right. Doug, anytime we go to Las Vegas, you're going to talk about the Busch brothers. That's where they're from. But once again, Kyle Busch, Kurt Busch have problems at the Speedway. Do you think they just try too hard to make something happen in their hometown?
For Kurt, I know he cut a tire down and spun out in the James Finch car and trashed the car, and that's a team that can really ill afford to lose a race car. And for Kyle, I think sometimes he might get a little bit too much up on the wheel, but he's already conquered that place, so he's got that trophy there. He's just slow getting out of the box this year. And, going back to Kurt, I know there's a lot. He is super talented, but there's going to be a point this year, I think, where his talent cannot keep up with the race cars that are going to be underneath him from James Finch. I mean, 18 employees versus 250. They may be able to put up a great David fight, but eventually I think Goliath wins that.
And I know they posted some of Kurt's spotter talk of his radio chatter. And we talked about Kurt being a new Kurt Busch there, having more fun, and certainly he was upset. Feels like he has this dark cloud over him. Do we make too much of maybe what he said over the radio at this particular racetrack? And because I know a lot of people now want to see it's the same old Kurt Busch. Joe, you listen to these drivers all the time. Do we make too much about sometimes what they say over the radio?
If we could air 43 of the drivers' comments during a race, we're going to be able to pick out more than just his comments. Obviously, the more we're frustrated as a driver, the more you're going to push the button, which is your only release. It's a pressure cooker, and that little device is going back on the top, and eventually it just can't hold the steam anymore, and that driver's going to push to talk and say things he regrets. The best of them have done it. We've cornered our cameras on Kurt Busch, unfortunately, and he is animated. He's very animated, but what makes him animated also makes him very good. I thought what he said on Sunday was he's just frustrated. He didn't say anything bad. He wasn't derogatory to any of his team members or his owner or anybody about the series. He was just frustrated. and you could have probably listened in on, again, 40 of the other drivers, because obviously Tony wasn't going to say a whole lot. He was out front leading, and Matt wasn't going to say a whole lot. But the guys running third on back, they were frustrated as well, and I'm sure everything wasn't just roses on their radio.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about the thrilling conclusion to the Cobalt Tools 400 and 3 different winners in our first 3 races. What have we learned so far in 2012? We'll answer that question when we return here on 3 Wide Live. Welcome back to the PRN studios here at Charlotte Motor Speedway. The show is 3 Wide Live. I'm Tony Rizzuti. I'm joined by Doug Rice and Joey Meyer. The end of the race at Las Vegas, guys, came down to restarts. And, Joey, you were a part of one. Your driver, Brad Keselowski, lined up on the outside on one of the restarts and then didn't get going. What was the problem with the Blue Deuce?
We had a fuel issue, an EFI issue that the team's still trying to diagnose to prevent future failures. A lot of just smaller issues that are rearing their ugly head with the EFI system. And it's not that a particular problem. It's just we have more parts doing more work. So we're going to have more failures. If we ran 8 tires on these cars, we'd have more tire flats. So now the simple fact is we have more mechanical parts on the car associated with EFI. We're going to have more problems. Right now, the Penske team is in Nashville doing a lot of testing, just trying to diagnose those issues.
If you want a thrilling into the race, Doug, restarts are where they're at because the guys really get up on the wheel. And we saw Tony Stewart make an incredible 3-wide move on the bottom. Then he had to try to hold off 5-time champion Jimmie Johnson. And I'll tell you what, when a guy suddenly decides that it's time to go, I don't think there's a better person than Tony Stewart at winning a race. You had 2 of the behemoths of NASCAR going at it. What'd you think of that finish?
I love that stuff. I mean, you had 8 championships battling each other over the last 20 laps of that race. And it was won or lost to me on the restarts. Tony had just gargantuan restarts. On the next to the last restart, I thought he was going to get black flag because it seemed like he was 10 car lengths ahead before they got to the start-finish line, but he went on the flag, so it was all good. And he was really – that's where he was winning and losing the race. And then, there's nobody that I would want out front more to keep the lead than Tony Stewart in this business. And I'm not just saying that because he won last week. Week in and week out, I've got to think he's the hardest guy in our sport right now to pass and take the lead away from.
Yeah, it was an unbelievable run. And then in the post-race press conference, they asked Jimmie Johnson. Certainly, Stewart-Haas gets their chassis and their motors from Hendrick Motorsports. They asked Jimmie, are you going to request the engine mapping that Tony Stewart ran? And he said, I already have. Yeah, definitely. It's got to be a 2-way street. Yeah. They asked Tony Stewart about it, and he was like, I don't think I'm going to share it with anybody. Then he kind of came back and said, well, maybe I'll share it with Hendrick. Yeah. What do you think of that, Joey? Should it be a 2-way street there?
A lot of the stuff, that's not even our choice. NASCAR has already said that they're going to allow the race teams to look at the basic mapping so that we don't come across an issue where somebody has really gained a humongous advantage, which NASCAR is always trying to control. One of the things the teams are allowed to do is look at driver inputs from the ECU. That information normally is not allowed to another team. So that would be the only difference, that whether Jimmie can get it or Tony allows it to get over there. But from an ECU mapping standpoint, every team, we can look at any team and they can look at ours. But NASCAR allows that.
Doug, do you like that, or does that take some of the ingenuity away from the crew chiefs?
It's what we have to deal with now. I mean, so much of this now is out of the hands of the crew chiefs anyway. When they take a car like the 2 and they take it off of pit road so they can plug the computers up to it to see what's wrong, that's where we are in the state of the sport right now.
Obviously, 3 races in, not a whole lot of time, but we've seen quite a few things develop. Doug, do you have one big takeaway from the first 3 races, maybe an item that concerns you or maybe something that surprised you?
Surprised that Tony Stewart's won this early. It's the earliest he's ever won in his career. Frankly, I'm sitting back going like, they can't hop back on the horse like they did at the tail end of last year when they won 5 out of the last 10. Even though I know he struggled at Daytona, you throw Daytona kind of out of the mix. It's a wild card race anyway. But to see them back where they are right now, frankly, a little bit of a surprise. And the fact that Carl Edwards hasn't really factored into much right now, I don't know if he's having a little bit of a hangover from last year or not.
It's been over a year since he's won a race, and certainly we saw Denny Hamlin have that hangover last year that they never could recover from. Joey, you're up there. You have the best seat in the house. Yeah. You see the entire race. You concentrate on your car, but you see what's going on. What have you seen so far in 2012?
I'm not surprised that Tony won. I think, we've always talked about these drivers being able to pull out an extra pin before they throw that grenade, and I think Tony's pin was pulled the minute he hired Steve Addington. He had to prove that his decision to get rid of Darian Grubb in the middle of the chase after winning 5 of 10 in the championship wasn't wrong. So once Darian got Denny to victory lane in Phoenix, that put Stewart up on the wheel even more to prove to the world, that his decision was correct. The only thing I'm still concerned about is how many more teams are going to have EFI issues. And it's not that there's a problem. It's just that it's a new toy, and all the teams haven't gotten down to the mechanics of it all. It's not a perfected system. We hear no more complaining about the old, quote, COT car that we did in the first year when people just hated it. And I think that's where we're at with the EFI. It's just a new puppy, and sometimes it's not going to pee on the floor.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Next week, the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series heads to Bristol, Tennessee, Bristol Motor Speedway, Performance Racing Network. Mark Garrow, Doug Rice will have the call. We look forward to that. And based on what we've seen the first 3 races, I expect fireworks once again at Bristol. Couple other notes this week. IndyCar announced they are creating an animated movie called Turbo, which is based on a snail that dreams of winning the Indianapolis 500. He has some weird accident and suddenly he gains all this speed. Can that do for open wheel racing what Cars has done for NASCAR?
When I normally think snails, I think escargot, which would be a better name, by the way, because S-car, and then he goes.
I like that.
That's where I'm leading. It depends how good the movie is. If it's good, then it'll help. If it stinks and it's 1 out of 4 stars, it's not going to help at all. Kind of like Cars 1 was awesome and Cars 2 was all full.
Joey?
I don't know if Cars did a whole lot for NASCAR relative to what Days of Thunder did.
Yeah.
And it was a good movie.
Special tires.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to live right in Mooresville across from the Days of Thunder barn. I don't have anything I can relate to the Cars movie. So open wheel racing is what it is. I think their biggest thing is they have a new car coming out, which is unbelievably gorgeous with the body fairings and the new wings and the new nose. And I think that in itself is just going to draw more people to it because on the track it looks outstanding.
The other big news of the week was in NHRA. Robert Hight wins for John Force Racing in the rain-delayed Gator Nationals. That now makes it 6 straight event wins for John Force Racing. When you think about all the randomness in drag racing, whether it's the weather, how it affects the cars and the engine tuning, lane choice, your draw, with everything that happens there and how competitive it's gotten, how incredible is this that John Force Racing's been able to run off 6 straight wins?
Pretty incredible. I mean, because the room for error in that sport is so great. Nanoseconds decide each run, and just to get to the finals that many times would be incredible. To win 6 in a row, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it's 6 different tracks with 6 different setups, and like you're talking about, we're talking about a 6-second window. That is incredible.
He's Joey Meyer. He's spotter for the Miller Lite Dutch. Good luck this weekend in Bristol. Thanks for being on. And Doug will be looking forward to your call of the race up there.
Can't wait to get to Thunder Valley and call some 3-wide action.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And thanks to all of you for joining us this week. For Joey Meyer and Doug Rice and for all of us here at 3 Wide Life, I'm Tony Rizzuti. Thanks so much for watching and keep living the 3 Wide Life.
Jeff Tutino here with CNR Racing Incorporated. Hey, we've all been there. We fill our radiator up full of water, put a 32-pound cap on it, go to the racetrack, and all of a sudden we pick up mud and debris and the temperature starts to climb. Driver sits there and says, should I finish this thing and blow the motor up, or should I go in and let these guys clean the thing off? Well, today with a pressurized system, learning how to use it, those worries are over. Finish the race. So if the CNR pressure system's for you, or you've already purchased and you want to learn more about the installation, then check out our installation video.